Hello, good evening. And tonight on the probe, we take a critical look at how Ghana has fared at its climate negotiations at COP30. Has Ghana's voice been loud enough on the global stage? What real shift should we expect after this year's conference? And what lessons must we take home from Berlin? Joining the conversation tonight to discuss some of these things is the Honorable Isifo Sedu, is the Minister of State in charge of climate change and sustainability. Dr. Peter Derry is the Director of Environment at the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology and Innovation, as well as the Professor Nanama Brown-Kluche. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Environmental Protection Authority. When I return, we'll zoom straight into the conversation. Stay with us here on the probe. This COP30 that you are attending, tell us about the delegation we have here, as well as the difference you think we are making as a country at this year's COP30.
Thank you very much. We are here in Brazil, in Belém, and to actively participate in COP30. The delegation is led by Honorable Amabua and myself, the Lands Minister. We had the first engagement, which had to do with representing His Excellency John Dramani Mahama at the Leaders Summit, where our voices was made very clear. Honorable Amabua did the delivery on behalf of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, and he was very clear to speak for Africa and speak for Ghana. And principally, we looked at the financing gaps that we have in taking care of climate work. Specifically, we realized that the gap of 1.3 trillion is still hanging on us. So far, the commitment that we had was about $250 million out of 1.3 trillion. So clearly, we felt that there was a need to scale up, the financing for climate action, and also look at the public debt, because this public debt, we are all aware that is not the making of the African countries. Year in, year out, we have attacks from climate change in the form of overflooding, drought, and all those things which come with consequences, exacerbating the climate gaps, financing gaps that we're talking about. So we were very clear to say that, look, there's a need to look at a new financing regime which will address the African needs. An African-led financing regime that will free the physical space for development. So our voices were very clear. We didn't relent in that. And also at the opening session, I followed up, to state the case of Ghana, that it is time and the action has to be now for us to look at a new financing mechanism that will resonate the African problem and addressing this particular, gaps that we have. So, like the president of Brazil said, this COP30 is a COP30 of the truth. It is a COP30 of the truth. And Ghana, we did not miss a word. We spoke the African voice, we spoke the Ghanaian voice. Thank you very much.
Concerns have been raised actually with regards to action. A lot of talks have gone on over the years. More talk, little movement. Based on your engagement with at the high level, what do you see? Do you see any action this time around coming around?
Look, that's why I started by saying that, look, the president of Brazil, it was very clear. He said, look, we must change in our negotiations. And this COP is declared as the COP of the truth. Okay, so that tells you that there's a shift, in the way, the COP is handled this year, a clear shift. So, and everybody says that action has to be now. The voice is now, not later. Okay, so the resolve to see action to see things happen differently is very clear, and that has been, well communicated by, the leaders of the Ghanaian delegation.
Okay, I'll bring in Prof briefly, but I want you to touch on this key issue for me. Many have argued that Africa's voice at this year's COP is disjointed. Do you agree? There's no coordination for Africa's voice at COP30.
No, I have a different opinion. I think it is even more coordinated this year than before. Okay? Before we came to Brazil, we brought together the Ghanaian group of negotiators. We had a common platform where we engaged to state the Ghanaian problem, okay? And the Ghanaian problem is not far away from the African problem, okay? So we came here with one common voice as people from the same stock, and that is what we are pushing. I can tell you that as a Minister of State, I was part of the negotiation to the opening, ceremony for the negotiation. I was there, and my voice was clear. I stated the case of Ghana, and I stated the case of Africa. So I rather think that we are here more resolved to speak for Africa, defend our predicament, look for equity, look for fairness, look for climate justice, rake in more money to solve a problem that we didn't cause.
All right, thank you so much. I'll come back to you. Let me come to Prof, talking about getting our side of the bargain from COP30. You are a technical person as well as head of the EPA. Do you think we've been able to make our voices heard when it comes to getting the outside of the bargain from this COP?
Yeah, thank you. So as the minister mentioned earlier on, we have started with the right foot forward. So as per our preparations in Ghana, where we launched the roster for climate negotiators, we are more coordinated than ever for this year's COP. We had two ministers, Minister for Lands, Minister for Climate Change and Sustainability, leading the COP30. And they started by representing the government, as the minister just said. So we have started well. Our voices are being heard. We have heard it, and we will continue with the coordinated effort that we have here for our voices to be heard. Thankfully, this time around, Ghana is the president of the African group of negotiators. So, which means that the whole African voice is going to be coming from Ghana. Ghana is going to lead that, and we are not going to disappoint African countries at all for this COP. Ghana taking the leadership means there's confidence that the other African group or African countries have entrusted in Ghana. So we just have to do it right for ourselves and also for the rest of the African countries.
Right, climate financing is a major matter here at COP, especially when it comes to the G7 and China making demands for Global North to actually make funds available. When we spoke to the vice chairman of the G77, he said operationalization of the secretariat is critical. What would you say is our peculiar need when it comes to the financing bit of the climate adaptation for Ghana?
Yeah, so Ghana, it is clear. We're seeing the impact of climate change in our lives in Ghana. We have seen the flooding that we get from heavy rainfall. We have seen coastal erosion because of sea level rise. We have seen droughts also in our countries that is affecting farmers, that is affecting our water bodies and many others, which is a threat to food security and scarcity of water or availability of water. So these are all signs of climate impact in Ghana. With this, there are funds or sources of funding that we are supposed to access to make our people comfortable. Because as the minister said, this is no fault of ours for us to go through this kind of threats from climate change. So we need to have access to the funds at the global level, or as China is advocating for, which we support, the global north that have greatly caused global warming and that is affecting climate change, and we are having the impact. They should contribute into the fund. The pledges are enough. It is time for action. This year COP is that we are moving from planning to action. It is time to devote the funds into funding or money into the fund, and for countries, vulnerable countries especially, to tap into the funds to use for the adaptation that we need for our people. We need to survive through this system. We need the resilience on climate change, and we can't do that without funds. Our country, Ghana, do not have funds enough for the adaptation on climate change, because as you know, we didn't cause the issues of global warming. We didn't contribute much to the impacts that we are having today. So we need to have access to climate finance. We need to fill in the gaps, and we use this medium to also advocate for more funds into the adaptation fund, into the green climate fund, into the all sources of funds that Ghana can have access to.
Do you think, or let me say, do you see the commitment on the part of the Global North in pushing more funds into the adaptation fund?
Yeah, so far it's been pledges, and only a few countries have contributed into the funds. This time at COP30, we want to see the action. So all of us are putting our voices together for the action, for the payment into the funds, not just pledges anymore. We don't want to be hearing pledges. We want to see the action of payment into the funds.
Okay, thank you so much. Stay with us. Let me come to Dr. Derry. He is the Director of Environment at the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology. And I believe you are leading some of the delegation or some of the negotiations happening here at the COP. How is it going, and what would you want to say?
So far, the negotiations have just started. It started on Monday, so we are 3 days away in the negotiations. Critical issues that have come up in the negotiations are: number one, finance, and the issue has been on how to bridge the $1.3 trillion gap for developing countries, as per the adaptation gap report assessment that was carried out by UNEP. So that discussion is still ongoing. As you may recall, last year at Azerbaijan, we had pledges up to $250 billion. Now, if you subtract 250 billion from 1.3 trillion, you see that there's still a huge gap. So the negotiations here, developing countries, including Ghana and Africa for that matter, are pushing very hard to see how we can increase pledges, increase inflows beyond the 250 billion that was given last year in Baku, Azerbaijan. So that's one strong area. Of course, the developed countries are equally reluctant to do so for maybe some obvious reasons. But for us, what is important is for us to establish our case. Africa is also pushing alongside that, that we have a special circumstance. Why do we say we have a special circumstance? Africa is only contributing about 4% of global emissions. And if we are contributing as a continent about only 4%, why must we bear the brunt of the problem? That's why we are saying that yes, we understand that we are all developing countries that you need to help. But when it comes to Africa, our situation is different. There are other developing countries that are also emitting a lot. For example, China is a developing country, but China is emitting a lot. So you cannot classify Ghana and China in the same bracket just because we are all developing countries. So we want Africa seen as a special case. And that's one important area of the negotiations that Africa, including Ghana, is pushing for.
Breaking away from the G77?
No, we would converge where we need to converge, and then we divert where we need to divert. So we are united in diversity. So where we need to unite and speak as one voice, Ghana and Africa will join G77 and China. But where we need to make our own case as a special one, then we do that, because it is very true that Ghana cannot compete with countries like China, Mexico, Brazil, Russia. All these countries are developing countries. But truth be told, in terms of emissions, we are nowhere near. And so we can't lump all of us into that particular bracket. We need that differentiation at some point. But of course, there are common areas where we need to work together, in order to ensure that our mutual benefit is achieved. So that is another area. Then in terms of just transition, we are pushing strongly on just transition at this COP, as Africa or as developing countries, because of the unilateral actions that are being taken by the developed world. For example, we have what we call the carbon adjustment mitigation mechanism, which is going to put taxes on certain products that will come from developing countries, simply because those products are seen to be products that have led to some emissions that have been generated. This will not be very fair to us. For example, our cocoa could be affected, rubber could be affected, and some other important primary resources could be affected, and that can affect our economy. So we are saying that the transition must be just. In addition, if you look at countries like Ghana, where we have just discovered oil, if we are going to transition, and that transition is going to be very sharp, it means that we need to allow our natural resources that have been discovered to remain in the ground. That will be what we call stranded assets. Now, these stranded assets, who pays for the opportunity cost of the stranded assets which will be left on the ground? So we are saying that the transition should be just. We should consider the economies of all these developing and vulnerable countries and make certain special case, so that we are not badly affected because of some of these unilateral actions that the developed world is taking. Then we are pushing for increase in adaptation financing. Climate financing cover both mitigation and adaptation. We are saying that we should shift resources more towards adaptation, because you see, adaptation is here with us today. Mitigation is about the future, but adaptation is here with us today because we are bearing the brunt of the problem. And so we need to solve the problem. We need to be able to bounce back with all these negative impacts that are affecting countries because of climate change. So we are saying that more resources should be allocated also for climate change adaptation. So these are the very important issues that are topical in the discussions. There is still this whole debate about transitioning away from fossil fuels, facing down, or moving away from fossil fuels completely. That debate is still there. Of course, the like-minded countries are still at where they are, insisting that no, we should have transitioning away, so that it's a process and not an event. Of course, the developed world is insisting that we should move away completely from fossil fuels. So that debate is also still ongoing in the negotiations. It's still early days, and so we are unable to tell how things would end up. But negotiations are advancing in these areas, and very soon we would see the direction that things are going in terms of what decisions will be made. So that's how the negotiations are progressing.
Largely, would you say Ghana is actually making its voice heard at the negotiating table?
Yes, we are doing this both at the high level dialogues that are being organized and also at the technical negotiations level. We have Ghanaians that are even leading the AGN positions. There are different tracks of negotiations that we have Ghanaians leading. For example, response measures is being led by Ghanaian. We have climate change adaptation. We have Ghanaian in there that is also leading the process. So we have Ghanaians leading certain tracks. And as it was said, a Ghanaian is going to assume the position of chair of the African group of negotiators. That is also an opportunity for us to ensure that our voice is heard and that our positions are pushed through at the AGN level. Then to move from the AGN to G77 and China, and then eventually to the COP negotiations. So that is how we are pushing our case. We don't just depend on our voice as an individual country, but also ensuring that we integrate our voice in the different negotiation blocks that we are part of, because that then gives it weight in terms of getting acceptability at the negotiations.
And what would you say is the response of the global north of all this push that you're making?
Oh, as for the push factors, they are always there, because that's why we call it negotiating. So you're negotiating. I'm looking at my interest. You are looking at your interest. You're looking at how it will affect you. I'm looking at how it will affect me. I'm looking at what I can get from it. You're also looking at what you can get from it. So yes, that is very obvious, and definitely because of the historical factors. The fact that they are the people who historically have created the problem. They will always want to create some kind of position that will make them comfortable, or else, of course, then you put them in a very uncomfortable situation. So they will try to create that comfort for themselves. And in doing so, they will want to resist or be very reluctant towards accepting certain things that you put on the table. But we will say that, okay, fine, that's okay. What is past is past. But then let's help each other to clean it up. And in getting it cleaned up, please, we know you are more resource than us. So bring what you can bring. And that is what we call common but differentiated responsibility. We are saying that we have a common problem that we need to solve, but that we have different responsibilities in approaching the solution. That's what it means.
All right, let me come to Prof before I go to Honorable. At EPA, what specific steps are you taking to speed up Ghana's adaptation effort in spite of the illegal mining situation in our country?
Yeah, thank you. So together with the ministry and other sectors, we are implementing the adaptation plan. Aside that, Ghana submitted our nationally determined contribution. So what we do is not just do adaptation, but we work also together on mitigation. So we have submitted our plan on how we are going to cut emissions. So we do the adaptation together with the mitigation. In terms of illegal mining and planning adaptation, as you have asked, yes, whilst we're planning to deliver agriculture in Ghana because of impact of climate change, we also know that illegal mining is devastating our lands. And so the impact of climate on agriculture, which is more of drought, drying of our soils, drying of our water bodies and all of that, it's, as Peter said, exacerbated by the mining activities as well. So it is on us as a country to do whatever possible to stop illegal mining so that we can manage our adaptation plan on issues on climate change, because the funds out there for adaptation does not include illegal mining activities. It's a conversation we want to start having, because it eventually affects the security of the people. I mean, food security, water security of the people. So we will start this conversation very soon. In fact, we've started talking about this very soon, and about it already, and very soon it will be a big discussion at COP. We realize that it's not only Ghana which is going through the illegal mining and disturbing our lands, disturbing our forests, disturbing our biodiversity especially. And so this will be a conversation we'll soon have on a bigger platform going forward.
We've seen you at EPA started some initiative called land reclamation under the illegal mining situation.
Yeah.
What is the objective for that? People are saying Galamsey is going on, and why reclamation?
Yeah, so thank you. So as the director said earlier on, we got some funds because of our national adaptation plan to reclaim land that had been lost through deforestation, droughts, and all of that. So that's one, we got some funding from the United Nations to do it. But we also realized that illegal mining has devastated most of our land. Now, according to World Bank reports and confirmed by EPA report, about 3 million of our hectares, 3 million hectares of our land is devastated or degraded through illegal mining, which means that where farmers used to farm will no longer be accessible to farmers, and that we need to reclaim, if for nothing at all, for farmers to get back the lands to grow food for us, which also means that some forests have been degraded. These are forests that saved us from carbon dioxide, that saved us from heavy winds and all of that, or high-speed winds. So we need to get back the forests, and we need to reclaim the land before we are able to get back the forest and get back our farmlands also for food. So the only way now, whilst we plan or we are in the process of stopping illegal mining, we need to reclaim the lands that are already devastated. So we go through the process of, apart from reclaiming, getting our land for farming and getting the land again for our forest cover.
You are reclaiming the land, but the water is getting polluted. As government, we need water to survive. You know that.
Yes.
What steps are you taking at EPA and the ministry to ensure that at least those communities who have been adversely affected get some clean water?
Yeah, thank you. This current government had a manifesto, and two key things on illegal mining was reclaiming our land and restoring our water bodies. It was made clear in the science manifesto. So EPA, together with the Ministry of Environment, we are working together to restore also our water bodies. We have so far secured a technology that can clean our water bodies. We have several proposals of technologies that are clean our water bodies. As we always advocate, the mining is still ongoing in our water bodies. We need to stop that and be able to clean our water bodies. The ministry and the EPA is taking steps to conduct a pilot to show to Ghanaians that we have the technology to clean our water bodies, to get back our water in its blue state. However, we have to stop the illegal mining activities in our water bodies, because the activities actually block our water bodies from flowing. So we need to create the waterways, clean the water, and get the water back to the communities for their use.
Okay, one would say, why don't you end the galamsey before you start cleaning the water?
Yes, so stopping the illegal mining or galamsey is not a one-day exercise. We also know that we need the water immediately, and we need the land reclaimed also immediately. So whilst we are in the process of stopping the illegal mining operations, which is not simple, we have to also make efforts to reclaim the land and to restore our water bodies, and we are doing exactly that.
All right, thank you so much. Let me come to Honorable Isifu Sedu. You are in charge of climate change and sustainability. I want to find out from you, is there any policy shift from what used to be in terms of managing our environment, climate, before and now?
Thank you. Well, it's very clear. You just said the Minister of State in charge of climate change and sustainability. You realize that this is a novelty in Ghana. We didn't have that. So the fact that this office was created by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama tells you that the conversation has changed at the policy level. Okay? So it tells you that leadership is committed, leadership is resolved to make sure that we integrate, climate-related activities in our policies. Okay, if you look at what is happening now, climate-related matters are everywhere. From one ministry to another, climate change affects every facet of our life. Okay, if you look at our NDC manifesto page 84 and 85, you see those pages are clearly, assigned to how we have to tackle the environment, to make sure that the activities, what we do today, does not affect future generation. Okay, so my role, in coordinating all these ministries, gives me an opportunity to rally the needed resources for national action. So at the highest level, the political will is there, and that is what is very, very important for us. So I can tell you that at the policy level, it is even factored in our manifesto. And naming this office is an indication that there's the political will, the political commitment is there for us to face climate change head on. I was telling somebody that the big push is coming up. We're looking at the climate dimension to the big push. Okay? We're looking at the climate dimension to the 24-hour economy project that we have. Okay, what do we do to ensure that in fixing the infrastructural gap that we have, we factor in the climate dimension, we see sustainability, we ensure that at the end of the day, the construction that we're doing does not affect future generations. So that tells you that at the top policy level, His Excellency John Dramani is head on that, and that forms part of our reset agenda, the climate dimension to the reset agenda.
Well, over the past 9 or 10 months, are there any clear successes you'd want to mention you've been able to chalk at the ministry when it comes to climate change?
Okay, so we agree that this ministry is a very new one. We're barely 7 months old. Okay, my role as a Minister of State in charge of climate change and sustainability is to give leadership in the climate space. How do I coordinate climate-related matters that affects all the sectors of the economy? Okay, so immediately I set up a technical working committee in my office, which is made up of representation for all sensitive ministries. The 22 ministries are represented in that committee. Okay, and that gives us an opportunity to understand the sectoral climate initiatives that we are taking, and how do we envelope that and have a national climate action to promote our climate activity. So this particular committee is very vibrant and working, and I'm pushing to take it to cabinet for cabinet approval so that it becomes institutionalized. That look, if for us to have effective coordination of climate-related activities, we need this technical working group or committee that will champion the sectoral initiatives, and this will be enveloped for our national action. Beyond that, we are also pushing that we should have, climate and sustainability unit in all the ministries in Ghana. We should have that in all the ministries in Ghana, so that once we have that, they will be championing together with the departments and agencies under these ministries. They will be championing the sectoral climate-related issues. Okay, and once we do that, it means our direction, we are mainstreaming.
Is there anything your ministry is going to do specifically to push for that across board?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That okay. So what we're doing is that we've already had engagement, stakeholder engagement with all the ministers, okay, and the ministries, and we're working on a document that is going to cabinet. Once it gets to cabinet and we get the endorsement, these units will be institutionalized. And we're even looking at the district assemblies. How do we champion locally led adaptations? How do we ensure community sensitization? The EPA Prof just talked about, we have to stop galamsey. It is a human behavior. What is their understanding about the activities that they engage in? And that is why we need to have the localized units at the district assemblies. They will be engaging these communities on a sustainable basis. And once we do that, behaviors will begin to change. Okay. So this is the kind of advocacy and institutional
How
framework.
soon are we likely to see that trickle down to the...
It's a process, okay. Like I told you that we are doing stakeholder engagement. Once we are completed with that, we're going to do a cabinet memo and take it to cabinet for cabinet's approval. These things cannot be done that way. It has to go to cabinet for approval. Once we are able to get cabinet convinced that this is the way to go, then implementation, will roll out. Let me add quickly that this involves a lot of money. We are already ahead. I know you were going there. We are already ahead, talking to a lot of institutions. We are in collaboration with so many UNIDO, C4All, so many institutions. They are interested in these projects, and they feel that climate change is a behavioral one. So once we begin to have this unit at the local assemblies, they will be able to do the community work, sensitization, influencing behavior, so that we can have a positive action. So already we are doing that, and a lot of proposals are being turned around ahead of going to cabinet.
Okay, so my understanding is that if this policy comes into reality, we're going to have climate change desk or department at the local assembly.
Yeah, and they will have that. They will also be collaborating with other institutions like the EPA. They are also championing environmental issues and climate-related matters. How do we integrate that so that we can have common language to speak? How do we integrate other institutions, NGOs that are within the local assemblies, so that at the end of the day, whatever we are doing it collectively. Okay, so once we get cabinet approval and we have the right funding, we are going to have that roll out as quickly as possible.
Where would the funding come from?
I told you that we are talking to UNIDO, we are looking at the adaptation fund, we are looking at other sources, philanthropic sources. And I'm sure once we show the leadership, it will get to a point that government will begin to be interested in it, because it's also about resource. How do we deliver the resource so that government can also come in to support? So we're looking at that. Lastly, we're also looking at establishing a climate and sustainability hub in Ghana.
Okay.
That hub is supposed not to lead only Ghana. The vision is that that hub should lead the sub-region, where I call it a climate center of excellence. That center of excellence is going to have a research unit there, a world-class climate laboratory to investigate climate-related diseases. We have the climate think tank unit there. We have capacity building unit there. A one-stop center for climate action, where the CSOs, the NGOs, the researchers can go in. It's also supposed to hold climate data for research work. So these are initiatives that are, at the stakeholder level that we're talking. And I heard we've done proposals to so many organizations who are interested in supporting to raise the needed funding for us to execute this.
Before I come to Prof and Doc, I want to find out how you are linking all this to our neighbors in West Africa, because climate issues, anything happening in Nigeria can affect us. So as a government, how are you connecting all these policies and initiatives to our neighbors in the region?
Well, what I can say is that this game of climate-related, challenges is not restricted to one particular country. Okay, that is why we have this African group of negotiators. Already, those barriers have been breached already. That when you come here, you negotiate in bloc. Okay, when you come here, you have common platforms that you share ideas. Recently, nominated to serve on the board of CVF. Now, the CVF is the Climate Vulnerable Forum. That forum represents 75 different countries across the globe. Okay, they are championing, climate initiatives, climate funding, supporting countries to be able to build local resilience and all those things. So these are platforms that are available for us to share best practice, which, all of us will come together and work and make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. So we're here as Africans and we're negotiating together as Africans.
Okay.
From here, I'm going to join a meeting, a ministerial meeting for African, countries. Okay, that's a platform to talk about Ghana and talk about other countries. How do we synchronize our efforts to build resilience? How do we synchronize our efforts to ensure that we're able to lead locally or initiate locally led adaptations to be able to contain this situation? Like Prof said, adaptation is an emergency. It's a climate justice matter. Okay? And this particular summit is looking at it as an emergency. It's not a talk show now.
Yeah.
For us to be able to contain the climate shocks, we should look at climate adaptation as an emergency and as part of climate justice, so that we can rally ideas and the needed resources to sponsor
As we wrap up the conversation, we want to pick some lessons from this year's COP30 to improve upon COP31 next year. How would you describe Ghana's organization coordination of COP30? I'm asking this question because I see other countries have some pavilions of a sort, and I've gone around the entire venue. I've not seen that. As the minister in charge of climate, how would you rate our own coordination of this year's COP? Are there certain gaps that we need to improve upon come next year?
Yeah, thank you. So we have all seen what you have said, and as a team, we keep reviewing. At the end of every day, myself and EPA and Messi, together with Amabua, we review our work, look at other areas, what has happened, and so it is new to say that we don't have a stand. Previous years, we have always had stands and things like that where we conduct businesses and things. But the innovation that we have brought in, we should be able to take care of it, because we are looking at the UN stand to see how we can collaborate with them, you know, to be able to do business. Okay, but going forward into subsequent ones, we're going to see a dedicated pavilion for Ghana where Ghanaian people will go and sit and do businesses. But in the meantime, we have decided to look at the UN to see how we can work with them.
In the meantime, we are patching. In the meantime, we are patching.
In the meantime, we are patching to achieve results. Okay? We are patching to achieve results.
All right.
But into the future, we are working on that.
Okay.
In fact, we just had a meeting yesterday that COP30 will start immediately after, you know, some number of months after. I mean, COP31 arrangement will start. Once we begin to start, we should be able to raise the needed funding to do that. Okay?
Okay.
It is possible for us to raise the needed funding to do that.
Okay.
But in the meantime, we are ensuring that all opportunities are taken care of. Opportunities available for Ghana, whether we have a pavilion or not, we are able to take that because we have that leverage, you know, with the UN to use that pavilion for us to do business.
Right. Beyond the pavilion, any lessons we are picking from COP30? What should change back home after COP30?
Well, we have to take it seriously. The COP business is a very serious business. Okay? We have to take it seriously and we have to have the right investment in it. Okay? Because like you said, you have a stand. Other investment opportunities will also be put onto the table for people to come and take advantage of. It's a clear business. We should look at COP30, COP as a business, okay? It's not a philanthropic thing. It's a business. And we should be able to raise the needed resources to sponsor the right people here, engage the right technical minds, engage the right media, engage the right investment people who have the investment portfolios. The GIPC should have been here to showcase the investment opportunities of Ghana, region by region, for us to see whether we can get investors to come in. Okay, so these are things that we'll look at going forward. But you shouldn't also forget that because of the calamity that we had, it also slowed down our organizational capabilities. I mean, you shouldn't forget of that. So amidst all these challenges, we have been able to think outside the box to have, you know, a pavilion where we can co-host. We're not pitching, we're co-hosting with the UN to be able to do business. Okay. So we're on top of the game.
All right, thank you so much. Let me come to Prof. Prof, any lessons from this year's COP? Should we expect any new things next year? What should Ghanaians watching us from the COP see differently when the COP is over?
Yeah, thank you. So as we have mentioned earlier on, we have reorganized ourselves for COP because, as the minister said, this is the first time we are having a ministry dedicated for climate change and sustainability. This is the first time Ghana has launched a roster of climate negotiators. And so we come to COP very coordinated. This is the first time Ghana is coming to COP with limited number of representation. So this year we're very, very particular about the participation. So everyone you see at COP with Ghana's name registered has a responsibility to follow a conversation or a negotiation. So which means that we rather want to spend more time, more energy, more knowledge and more funds into reorganizing ourselves than the usual way of attending COP. So the lesson here is that this time we are more organized. We assure Ghanaians that we'll bring back home better things we are negotiating here for our climate adaptation actions that we plan to undertake. The director mentioned that we just don't want to say we are impacted by climate change. We did research for critical areas we have to look at. So we have priority areas that we have to look at before we go general areas on issues of climate change. So these are areas we are negotiating Ghana's messages on. Then we go back home with something tangible for Ghana. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Any last word from you before we go to Doc? With regards to the COP and
yes,
what to expect?
Yeah, so generally we know the impact of climate change is huge on Ghana and of course many other African countries. Ghana is going to be the head or is leading the African group of negotiators. Whilst we share our stories as Ghana, we're also sharing our stories as Africans because we are taking the lead as Africa. We want to lead with a difference. We want to lead for all African countries to have the faith, the belief that they have in the country Ghana and move forward with tangible solutions for our climate crisis. We have other opportunities. When it comes to climate change, it's not just about the crisis or the problems or challenges that we have. We have opportunities like carbon credits that we can sell. So in our negotiations, whilst Ghana lead, in fact, Ghana is the first country in Africa that has been able to transfer its first carbon credits to the government of Switzerland. And so this is also a lesson other countries in Africa can learn. And we know that most African countries are carbon credit worthy and they can learn also from Africa. Taking the lead as African group of negotiators will also bring in other African countries on board to learn from Ghana how we worked our carbon market registry as hosted at EPA, how we have planned it, how we have made our program very attractive to the government of the global north. So other African countries can also learn, and we are ready to teach, guide them through how they can equally make or take advantage of carbon market program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me give you the final word. Doc, how Honorable spoke about plans government is putting in place to ensure that climate change issues trickle down to the local level. As a ministry, what specific roles are you going to play in ensuring that this works, not just something we put out there?
Yes, so what the minister has said is a very important thing to do, especially if we want to ensure that climate change is not just something that is sitting at the top of governance, but that it descends to local governance. We used to have what we call the local adaptation committees at the districts. And this fizzled out because they were project-based. They were supported by specific projects. So the projects were funding their meetings and activities. I am happy to hear from the minister that we want to institutionalize this so that we move away from the project approach to doing things to a more institutional way of having these things established. That is what we call sustainability. And I believe that is exactly the name of his office. So yes, we would support, because beyond just the establishment of the climate decks at the different assemblies, we would have to provide them with the needed policy support and also technical assistance in order to make sure that they are able to function properly. how will their work impact on the medium-term development plans that the assemblies usually prepare? How will that be properly mainstreamed and integrated to the extent that it should also reflect in their annual progress reports that they present to the NDPC?
Okay.
So these are the areas where the Ministry of Environment will bring its technical assistance together with the EPA, of course. And then, of course, knowing that the EPA also has now zonal offices and also district offices. The officials there would also be ready to assist the assemblies to ensure that when it comes to integrating climate actions into the medium-term development plan, this is done very well and reported as such. And that they are even able to come together to write proposals for support from either multilateral funds or even some development partners. 2 or 3 adjoining districts could come together to put together a proposal to the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund. But they will need assistance. Think of people who are knowledgeable in the area of environment, who understand how these financial institutions operate.
Well, that's all we have time for here on tonight's edition of The Probe, which came to you all the way from Belém in Brazil at the COP30 venue. I have been speaking to the Honorable Yusuf Fusedu, the Minister of State in charge of Climate Change and Sustainability, as well as Dr. Peter Derry. He is the Director of Environment at the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology and Innovation, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of the Environmental Protection Authority, in the person of Professor Nanama Brown Kluche, and they'll be sharing their thoughts on some lessons they are picking from COP30 here in Brazil and certain government policies that have been designed to ensure that climate adaptation and climate change issues are trickled down to the ordinary person at the local level. This has been The Probe from Belém in Brazil. My name is Carlos Caloni. Thank you so much for watching. You can log on to myjoyonline.com for more climate-related stories and publications on this year's COP30.